welcome to the second COMMB Talks event. Very excited for this particular discussion on programmatic digital out of home. We've got some great conversations, some great panelists, and of course, a fantastic co-moderator with me. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Amanda Dornberg, president of COMMB, which is the Canadian Out-of-Home Marketing and Measurement Association. We love all things out of home, and I know my panelists and my co-moderator does as well. So first and foremost, I'm going to introduce my co-moderator. So Patty Summerfield, thank you so much for joining us today. She is a journalist for Media in Canada. Patty, I will give you the floor to just do a brief intro for us, please.
Hi, everyone. I've been working with Brunico since 1992 and been bothering all of you in the industry since then. My focus in many recent years has been media and media research, and I will continue to bother you for a little while longer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. Patty has written some very interesting articles on all things out of home over the many, many years she's been reporting in our space. So we're thrilled to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time and for joining me today. We've got some incredible speakers with us. So I'll introduce first Michael Provenzano from Vistar Media. Michael, hello. You want to give us a 10-second shout out?
Hey, and thanks for having me. I'm Michael Provenzano, CEO, co-founder of Vistar Media. If you don't know Vistar, we're one of the largest software companies in the space, powering the buy side and sell side of programmatic out of home. So happy to be here, happy to share some thoughts.
Thank you very much. Next, we've got LiveDOOH's founder and CEO, Kenny. Kenny, do you want to give us a shout out?
Hello, everybody. Really a pleasure to be on this panel today. So I'm a founder and CEO of LiveDOOH, now LiveDOOH Signkick, since we've been merging with Signkick beginning of this year. Very exciting move for us. And we offer a smart optimization platform focused on the sell side of the industry with all the tech parts that you need to do it for increasing revenue and mediating programmatic demand for the market.
Thank you so much. Kenny is here with a global perspective on programmatic digital out of home, so I'm very excited. He's joining us currently from Germany, taking time out of his evening to be with us today. So thank you very much. Next from Dentsu Media, we've got Chief Client Officer, Carolyn Breton. Carolyn, would you like to give us an intro?
Yes, thanks for having me. So I actually recently joined the Dentsu organization as Chief Client Officer about 6 weeks ago. And really my role is around supporting the client lead, elevating the media product innovation, and making sure that we have the right talent in place. And I have a media planning background. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. You're going to have a lot to say about some of the questions we've got prepared for you today. And last but certainly not least, joining us from Apex Exchange, part of Publicis, we've got Nikki Stone, EVP there. So Nikki, give us a shout out, please.
Sure. So thanks for having me. Nikki Stone. I'm part of the Publicis family, mostly known for their brands Spark, Zenith, and Starcom. I sit in the PMX Center, which is the Center of Excellence for buying and digital practices. So I oversee the Apex team, as well as advanced capabilities and centralized out-of-home.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody joining us. We're over 100 now, so that's very exciting. And let's get to it. I think we just need to start off on a light foot here, and we'll address the programmatic digital out of home elephant in the room. If I'm a salesperson, is programmatic digital out of home going to replace my job? That's open to anyone.
Absolutely not. Coming from the agency, I think human touch and ideation are still needed. And this is such a rich space for collaboration that absolutely not. I would be saddened to see that happen.
I 100% agree with that. Google still has sales reps. Like a really obvious
Many of them.
And I think it's just it's a lot more collaborative on supporting insights and performance mid-campaign, leading into the campaign, mid-campaign, and post-campaign.
Yeah.
So that kind of, Michael, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I can agree with both those comments. It's pretty much, this is the question I got asked 10 years ago, day one of starting the business was, are you firing me indirectly? And it's far from. I mean, I think if you look at our company as a whole, we keep hiring more salespeople and more service people. The agency side, as we just heard, wants white glove service. They want that time and they want that human interaction. It's a human focused business at the end of the day. That is marketing as a whole. We're trying to have a conversation with consumers, so that's not too surprising. I will put a challenge out there, though. You know, there'll be a need for salespeople, but you might need to become a better salesperson so that another seller doesn't take your job. That might be a valid comment. But
that resonates also with our thoughts. And actually, it's a general thing with technology. People think, is technology going to replace us? So specifically in that domain, I think what it really does is give salespeople much better tools to do what they want to do. So instead of, you know, selling some slots or space or time, they might be selling very intelligent packages to their clients. And of course, then maybe you need to have better salesperson skills, but also you can have way more fun doing things which are much more valuable for your clients. So I totally agree with the rest of the panel there.
I think that's great insights, and having sat for many, many years on the operator side, education from the sales standpoint was a big component of the adoption of programmatic digital out of home. So with that, I'd like to understand from each of your perspective what role the salesperson sort of plays, because there's different sales channels that happen throughout the programmatic digital out of home sales cycle. So what role do you see the sales rep specifically playing? And you know, as a media owner, what would you encourage from them in terms of education with their sales teams?
I can take a very quick first shot. So from my perspective, salespersons will be doing basically similar things that they've always been doing. Also understanding the audiences, understanding much better the requirements of the advertiser clients, trying to figure exactly how to meet these requirements, and then selling them packages which are both interesting for them and also provide some value for their, of course, employers. But in that sense, programmatic is just one more channel. And you can really see it in this way. Either you pick up the phone, you make a direct sale, or you effectuate it programmatically. What you will see is you need to put the same kind of effort into persuading buyers and really achieving their interests with the campaign.
So are we seeing a varying difference between a direct IO being executed programmatically versus, you know, the programmatic sales team taking the bulk of the sales cycle? Michael, maybe you're better suited to answer that since you have a robust sales team that works with the media owner sales teams.
yeah, good question. This is like even like pre-onboarding a media owner, it's one of the first conversations we have. It's just, do you have a sales team? If so, how is it structured? And what's your plan for programmatic? Usually the answer is not sure when we start talking, and it's something that evolves over time. We've seen both people build a programmatic specific sales team from scratch within a media owner, and we've also seen companies take existing sales forces and then educate those sales teams and get them up to speed so that they could sell programmatic as essentially another mechanism or a checkbox in their sales pitch. The jury's out what the right solution is. There's pros and cons to both. In some cases, you're paying double commission, so incentives are misaligned sometimes. If you have two different teams, they could be fighting over the same brands, you know, of who owns them. So we've seen good and bad on both. And I can't say there's a winner yet, because I've seen people with independent programmatic sales teams do extremely well in market. And I've also seen media owners with their existing sales team re-educate that team and get them in a really good spot and make a lot of money as well. So I think deciding on a path and committing to it is probably the answer there. And it's really just about, you know, knowledge is power. Like, you need to have that knowledge in your entity, no matter if it's existing sellers or new sellers. And don't expect to sit back and programmatic just to be like some fire hose that brings you all the money. You got to do the work still.
I love that.
I will echo that. Like, we lean into our supplier reps often for like to help us with very specific campaigns or KPIs that are especially like some of the more complex ones that we tend to execute. And so it's a both. Like, we work with our DSP partner really well as to give us some insights, and then, you know, bring in like, okay, here are some of the partners that we know we need to bring into that conversation to enhance that performance based on what they already know, and they can help us make better decisions about, you know, when we do crazy things like cost per incremental store visit stuff.
I love it. I love it.
I have a few questions. What about the perception of programmatic adoption in Canada versus other countries, and the adoption rate in Canada versus other countries?
So I personally, I'll kick off here because I think that there's 3 ways that you can really look at that. And one is available inventory for that you can purchase programmatically. The second is overall percentage of spend, of out-of-home spend that's purchased programmatically. And then the third, in my mind, is the KPIs in which you're executing, you know, for things like that lower funnel activity. So if I were to look at it from those 3 perspectives, and please guys chime in and like tell me where I may be misguided in my opinions, because that's what they are. I think from a tech perspective, Canada seems to be ahead of many markets. I know, speaking to some of my counterparts in Europe, in certain parts of Europe, they're just starting to get that connectivity. And so the number of boards that we have connected here in Canada, the number of digital boards that we have, is pretty substantial. I think the last number I saw was well over 40% of digital boards in Canada were connected programmatically and growing vastly. So if I look at it from that side, I have to think that we're doing a great job. If I look at it from the billing side, I would also echo that Canada's pretty advanced, especially the last year in what the pandemic has done and helped us really push programmatic spending forward. I mean, in January, I think I saw a release from, I think it was eMarketer, that said Canada was between 3 and 5% of out-of-home purchased programmatically. And in the US, they're at less than 4 in the last report that I saw, and growing. They are predicting a lot of growth around it, especially if you look at the volume of overall out-of-home spend that they're looking at growing. But I think now we're probably well past that point in terms of percentage of spend locally. And if I look at it from a KPI standpoint, I know we've been told from our partners that we definitely execute some of the most complex executions that they've seen in the market. So all in, I'd have to say I feel like Canada's really advanced in this space, but I might be a little bit biased towards that.
I'd love to hear from Kenny, you and Michael as well. It looks like we might have lost Caroline briefly, but she'll pop back on, I think.
So it's an interesting question, because if you look at it from European perspective and you look over to the Americas, well, first thing you have to say is it's not at all standardized anywhere across Europe. So there are very, very big differences depending on the countries. So Netherlands, for example, always keep saying that is a country that's always been very advanced for programmatic already for several years, with some percentage of spend always going through programmatic channels. But if you look at the UK, then on the other side, you realize, oh, there's something going on, but it's just not called programmatic in the same way, which opens up this other interesting discussion. So In the UK, for example, agencies have been connecting more and more with not the open RTB standard, but the open direct standard. So is that now programmatic? I would always argue it is, and brings up this whole interesting discussion is what do we actually mean? What's the percentage of spend really going to programmatic? And is that really open auction? Is it private marketplace? You know, how to qualify that.
Michael?
Yeah, real quick. I guess we've been operating in Canada for a little over 4 years now. When I look at comparison to other market, to Nikki's point, it's definitely got all the pipes there. You know, I don't lose any sleep on the tech side, or can we get access to something, or does something work? Rarely do we walk into an agency room and say, programmatic out of home, have you heard of it? And the answer is no. I think everyone knows what we're talking about, or they've been bothered by us or one of our competitors in the last 4 years. I think that's kind of table stakes at this point. One piece of feedback I get from media owners is that the net growth is a bit concerning. So the media owners, and we've seen some of this as well, is a lot of times it's a transfer of dollars that was potentially going to go to them directly on the out-of-home side, now being transferred through a programmatic pipe. And I think a lot of media owners continue to be worried about this, not just Canada, but globally. We hear this concern across any market we enter. We say, well, is this just going to cannibalize my existing dollars? So I think there's potentially the opportunity to focus on the incremental side in Canada and how we can validate that that's true. I don't have a silver bullet on that one of how to prove it, but my guess, to Nikki's point as well, is that it's probably around proving ROI. I mean, if we can bring ROI to the table for brands and they see that it's worth the time to invest in out of home, I would assume that they're going to spend more money in out of home and the overall percentage investment would increase. So that would be my strategy. I think that's probably the right way to head to validate that. But those are kind of some of the concerns I've heard over time.
What about the inclusion of programmatic digital out of home in omni-channel buys and planning? Where does it stand globally versus Canada?
I don't know that I can, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know that I can speak to globally, but I think that in Canada, as more and more boards are becoming digital, I think the importance of programmatic digital out of home will keep increasing. It's a channel that offers flexibility. It allows us to streamline the inventory and reduce time to market. And it really makes it an ideal channel to activate. And coming out of the pandemic, advertisers are going to be looking for flexibility. And I think that that's a channel that gives us the flexibility that we might be looking for. So those are my thoughts.
We're just going to jump in with a question that came up in the Q&A box. And Kenny, I think this was relative to how you were sort of referencing the programmatic direct versus open exchange. So the question that has come through is, if programmatic is not automated trading, then what is it?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. And that really brings to the core of this. What is this word programmatic? You know, automated trading, in my view, is programmatic. It's just a different word to mean different things. And this discussion about open RTB, open direct keeps coming up. There was, for example, a London Digital Signage Week in May. There was a discussion, a presentation and saying, okay, what do people do with open RTB standard, which commonly somehow seems to be the vocabulary people understand what programmatic means. Well, actually, what you find is if you're doing auctioning, that's exactly what you do. But if you're doing private marketplaces, guaranteed deals, it's actually direct buys, you actually use programmatic open RTB just to execute them. So, you know, in other places, they'd say, oh, open direct is better. But you're getting into this whole discussion about, okay, the standards, the exact execution, what is programmatic and stuff. But on a whole, then, programmatic really just helping to execute, you know, buys, whichever way programmatically it means computer instead of taking the phone, etc., and sending creatives per email, is really what stands behind it. And I think this is what we should be talking about. And also this is where I think there'll be a lot of progress and lots of exciting things coming in the next years, when you don't really specifically limit it to one specific tech you're talking about, but really just a broader understanding of it.
I think that plays into a lot of the conversations that I know I was having when I was on the media owner side with respect to, you know, the difference between programmatic in native and digital versus programmatic in the out-of-home space. It really is an automated way of delivering advertisements versus a truly programmatic one-to-one experience with, you know, a specifically targeted ad to one mobile device that, generally speaking, one consumer is holding at all times. Mine's still directly in front of me, even though I'm staring at my laptop. So I think that it's a great conversation because it really does mean, you know, an automated delivery of the communications and the messaging that we're looking to put out to our consumers. It kind of brings me into my next question, which is really relative to the difference between a bespoke DSP. So, you know, Vistar, you have your own DSP versus an omni-channel DSP that you also integrate with. So I might point this question to you first, Michael. What percentage are you seeing coming through your DSP versus coming through an omni-channel DSP, like, you know, Oath or Adelphic?
Yeah, it's definitely been a changing landscape over the last few years, especially through COVID too, that kind of changed the time a little bit as well. It depends on the country. Every country is a little different on that, answering that question too. I think the in piece is that we're talking to the client, the agency, the brand, and understanding the need, right? At the end of the day, they're the boss, and we have to understand if they want a single platform to run every channel through, we're going to help them execute on that. Some of our clients, most of our clients, like to log into a specialist platform. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's built for out of home. It's streamlined, right? So a lot of folks do use our DSP. In the US, I would say over 85% of billings is still coming from our DSP. You know, we're seeing third-party DSP, omni-channel DSP revenue increase over time rapidly, which is awesome. We've been really supportive of that and trying to get those guys to spend more money. So we have an entire education process with them, teaching them out of home. We train and teach the sales teams of most major DSPs out of home 101, out of home 102, how to use data out of home, how to use measurement. So we are trying to, you know, raise all ships on it. They're called a cooperation, but it's been really productive so far. So I'm kind of excited to see where it lands.
That's awesome. Does anybody else want to add any commentary on that?
Maybe just a short from my side, just a short one. If you look at, you know, Europe and other markets, Asia, etc., what you saw is that when all the programmatic themes started to develop, there were some very omni-channel DSPs that were all in the mix. People start to bolt on technology onto what they have and try to, you know, adopt this. But what clearly came out then very fast is there are some very specific out-of-home specialized DSPs that were quite active. I spoke about Netherlands, but also the whole DOOH, Germany, Austria, Swiss region. You could talk about Splicky, Sage Narger, Platform 161, things like this. Also in Asia, very specific out-of-home DSPs. And that's because they're different. It's a different medium. It has its specificities. What you want to do in out-of-home is not necessarily, you know, conversion or so. Sometimes it's just brand awareness. So you need a DSP that can sell to the buyers, the out-of-home space, not just the way it would sell to, you know, for mobile advertising channel. But you also need the technical capabilities from the DSPs, audience multipliers, just a very simple thing about it, and how you handle creatives. And now finally, what we're seeing is actually the omni-channel DSPs coming back. I'm just citing, for example, Verizon Media also, which is entering more and more into the space. So this makes it really interesting because I think also the cross-channel aspect of this comes more and more into play, and that's the real strength of it.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Go ahead.
Like I'm no expert, but what I was going to say, and again, I'm not, you know, in the execution, the planning and the execution of out of home every day, but a bespoke DSP for me it's a specialized DSP, right? And there's advantages that come with that. As opposed to something that's omni-channel that may not be focused. So I think there are advantages, disadvantages to both, but I do think a bespoke platform may be better at what it does because it's focusing.
I'd have to,
Yeah.
I echo that completely. For us, working with our bespoke DSP partner, specifically on the Apex side of our business, where we have these really complex, like we were working with Spark for a cost per incremental store visit campaign, or path to purchase stuff that we were doing with the COMMB teams. Having that partner that we could lean into, that was really specialized, just was everything in that moment for us.
So that leads me to, I had a question that I had sort of wanted to touch on relative to pricing, but I think it's going to get answered with this question that came in from the audience while the panelist was chatting. So the question that recently came in is, it was mentioned that programmatic provides a lot of flexibility. So could we define what that means? So what are the top 3 benefits of programmatic from a planning perspective?
So I think flexibility in terms of lead time, right? I think the lead times are probably not as long. And then from a creative perspective, you can often, reuse what you're using for your digital plans. So I think that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I talk about flexibility. And then, another benefit of programmatic, and it's I don't know that it has to do with the flexibility or not, but I think it's the ability to really tap into tech and data to get some invaluable insights on your consumers that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah, agree. I think the data is a very, very interesting part. I think that's one of the bigger developments when programmatic came into out of home. It's still out of home, it's bought programmatically, but why is it evolving so much? It's because the data is becoming more and more available to make that possible, and it wouldn't be possible without it.
And I think that's what lends you to like the flexibility on your performance, because you can optimize, you're not stuck with an underperforming board when you might need the one across the street because the traffic patterns are indicative that that's a more traveled route towards the path to purchase. So you can really optimize in the moment.
Yeah, and I think the data used for optimization, and optimization, of course, I have to say this because we're actually specializing a lot in that area, but optimization is a key point and can mean many things. And in order to optimize your revenues or the outcomes, you need data. And this is become more and more and more available in out of home, which is really a blessing.
This kind of brings to mind where it falls into within an agency. Who does the planning for programmatic out of home? And is it considered digital or is it considered out of home? What budget does it come out of? And
so having just come from another agency, I have I've seen different ways. Everybody has a different way of dividing the work. At the risk of dating myself, when I started in the business, I planned it and bought it all. And, eventually we moved to a model where, you had planners and then buyers. And now we're even seeing models where you have somebody that will identify key channels, out of home being a channel. Then you'll have an out of home strategist that will, decide what kind of out of home, static. And then you'll have somebody that will go and execute. So I think it really, really depends on the agencies, but there's multiple models, and I don't know that one is better than the other.
Yeah.
what about the key tactical strategy when planning? Is it focusing on KPIs or how
Depends
is
on your brief, right? I think it depends on what you're trying to do for the client and what the brief is. Out of home, to me, digital programmatic out of home is an out of home channel, but it's bought programmatically. So the dollars and, and I don't think we should start with a budget first approach. It's not the budgets come from out of home, it's where they land. And again, my perspective is those dollars should land in the out of home space when you're looking at it. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question. Went off there.
I think for our side, it's so budgets aren't necessarily siloed. They're by media type, it's performance or awareness, and out of home can fit easily in both of those strategies. But in terms of like who plans, it starts with strategy always, and that team telling the client planning teams, like, here's the overarching strategy. And the client planning teams will decide if out of home is going to hit a plan, and at which point, like, we have a centralized out of home team that would then do that logistical planning about why this word over that word, or why programmatic over static, because it's not a uniform answer, depending on much to what Karen was saying, and depending on those KPIs and the outcomes of what you're trying to measure for the campaign.
I think these questions and these answers also reiterate the need for salespeople. Because no one's gonna be able to figure this shit out unless we have salespeople.
Oh, Michael, I love you. It's so funny.
But what about working with other
I'd like to add
out-of-home
maybe an interesting question about-
executions?
Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Kenny.
Just an interesting question, because we're talking about the budgets and where they come from and how they're planned. I mean, of course, we've seen this from a strategic point of view, also from agencies, but it's good to remember that, with programmatic, things become possible that were not possible before. A lot of small places, screens are exploding everywhere, small places that don't have own sales teams, that usually are not in the planning of an agency, because it's just too tedious to really execute across some small network of 10 screens here, 10 screens there. So the capability of actually addressing, aggregating them, and then booking these screens means that lots of local small advertisers, regional advertisers, can then now book more easily. And I'm thinking that also may change something in the agencies, where you get maybe a lot more requests from other types of buyers also that say, hey, well, these screens are now available. Can I do a different type of buy and not just a national buy? So I think maybe that brings more dynamic also in the whole industry in that way.
I was wondering about programmatic working with the other out-of-home media. Does that enhance its effectiveness? Does it work better when combined with traditional out-of-home? Is this
Yes.
something that's a strategy?
I might even layer onto that question. When you're looking at the holistic plan of programmatic digital out-of-home and its inclusion in your overall media mix, where does it fit in with respect to your omni-channel and your native online and your other sort of media components? And I'd love to hear the differences between, Michael, you having your own sort of sales team and your experience on the agency side, ladies.
I'm happy to kick that one off. I mean, first of all, Patty, to answer the start of your question, yes. If that was my only answer to it, yes. I think that there is so many studies that have come out. I love a good bit of research, and tend to find a good bit every month, and that all research always points to the fact that out of home complements every media type. I mean, even Facebook published something that was like social performed 18% better. But if 18% wasn't enough to get you going, well then, like, Nielsen had a study that was fantastic that said search performed 80% better when layered with out of home. So there's not a media type that out of home doesn't love, including from a programmatic to a static point of view. Like, those two together, you can get awareness and tactical, like, lower funnel activity in one campaign if you were just going to choose one media type. So, like, full funnel all the way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was actually say, that's the beauty of marrying the two. You have the brand building ability of that big innovative message on a mural or in a big board, combined with sort of the technical or tactical, abilities of digital programmatic. It's really the sort of the intersection of tech, data, and innovation for me. And I think that's just an amazing place to be.
At Vistar, we don't have the breadth that an agency would have, right? We don't see all channels, but commenting to what we do focus on and of reaching consumers in the physical world, we, in the early days of Vistar and still today, we do provide mobile extension. So we see a lot of customers who want mobile and out-of-home combined, which is not surprising, right? In the physical world, walking around, hit them down and looking down their phone, or they're looking around. Classic. And we have tons of studies around that. We've built a lot of kind of perfection around that kind of two combo. One thing that's interesting is the way and the data, to Kenny's point around the data you use and the way you measure success is the same across static and digital out of home. It's all spatial related, right? So the way you plan whether this piece of paper is going to be the right board for me to buy versus this digital board is going to be the right one for me to buy, it's using the same data. The only difference is the temporal component, the time of day component that you can add with digital. Lets you be slightly more optimized. And the same thing goes for measurement, right? We recently released a few months ago with other partners a standardization for exposure methodology. So if you got an industry-wide definition for exposure, you can say this is how someone's exposed to static or digital, and you can look holistically at all of that investment in terms of what success looks like. And then lastly, to Kenny's point around transaction types, I think, the direct versus programmatic kind of concept of how people could split their budgets really goes back to guaranteed versus non-guaranteed inventory. This is no different than booking a hotel or an airline. There are pricing differences to getting a guarantee versus getting a last minute deal, and what you should be paying for that, and the fact that you might have to enter an auction, and even though you think you might be getting a good deal, you might have a lot of bidders against you, and you might be raising your prices for what you're going to pay for inventory. So there's a lot of dynamics that come into play when you start kind of crossing multiple parts of the how do you access this inventory. Pricing becomes, and scarcity becomes a bigger conversation.
So that kind of leads me into another question in the sense of what percentage of deals are you seeing coming through PMPs versus, an open exchange bid?
Depends on the market. Every country is slightly different on that one. We're still seeing about 70% open exchange in the US. I think it's pretty similar numbers actually in Canada as well. It depends on the sellers, actually, the media owners more than anything.
Interesting.
So you have to remember, a lot of the ways that people use PMPs today are sellers looking to have a bit more control over what's happening in programmatic as a channel, right? So they want to work directly with a buyer and say, hey, maybe this is a buy that spent last quarter, brands come back again this quarter because they like the results of the campaign, and they say, hey, I know you guys are spending last quarter. If you're going to spend again this quarter, maybe we can negotiate. Maybe I can do a little deal on pricing with you. Maybe I can get a little guarantee if you're putting $5 million to work. Maybe I can get in $1 million of that, right? So I think PMPs give media owners a bit more control. On the buyer side, it gives them the ability to maybe lock in a rate, get a fixed rate in when they have more certainty around maybe where they want their delivery. So there's, obviously advantages and disadvantages to both, but we still see open exchange being fairly large, and it probably goes back to the notes that a lot of this group already mentioned, which is data-driven buying, having the flexibility. Open exchange is by definition the most flexible thing you can get into. So we still see that as prevalent today.
What about the agency perspective on that? Are you seeing more? Are you experiencing more PMPs? Or are you exploring more on the open exchange?
I can't really speak to that. I'm not close enough to it yet. So I don't know, Nikki, if you have a perspective.
Yeah, I think, well, that depends on what we're executing, candidly, right? If we're, I'll use the cost per incremental store visit as case study because it's been well published, even in the COMMB newsletter.
Yeah.
So it's a really easy one for me to talk about. Amazing insights in there, which is why I love this case study, because one, it's not historically how we would be interacting with suppliers. So being able to do that programmatically meant we could actually achieve that. We worked with All Vision in this case, who brought in Hivestack, and it was Spark Foundry who worked on this campaign. But we got so granular in that campaign that we were even able to identify which boards were driving the most traffic to particular store locations. So that was really telling, but that wouldn't have happened without a PMP deal. Because if we were just in the open market, we wouldn't have been able to have that same level of insight right down to the board location and the store location. There would have been such a large testing audience to go within, and we really wanted to understand with the large format boards and to get in there. So, but
depends more on the tactical strategy is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
and what the sort of desired outcome is.
Specific. Sometimes it really makes sense for us to go into the open market, and other times our PMPs are the best place for us to be, especially where we have guaranteed performance outcomes that we're hedging, and we've put our own dollars on the line to get those results. And if that's the case, PMPs are a real big safety net for us. We can have a lot of predictability in our modeling.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So just watching time, I've always got my timer on. We've got about 15 minutes left in the session. I do have a technical question that I want to sort of touch on. So this is going to be for the gents here, Kenny and Michael. What happens if I have a proprietary ad server? How do I integrate? What are the steps that I need to take as a media owner with a proprietary system versus something that's more widely adopted? How can I get my digital boards onto your platforms?
Maybe I can just go get a little head start, Michael.
Go ahead, knock yourself out on this one. It's a fun.
Well, it's interesting. If you have a proprietary ad server, that means you have a system that can deliver your ads, your content to your screens. You can monitor it, and now you just need to really get this demand in. And so what you need to be working on are your connections, etc. And you also need to have a little bit of intelligence in that ad server, because as soon as you're starting to combine multiple sources of demand, you're connecting to a DSP, you're connecting to another SSP, you're connecting to different types, and you have your direct sales, it becomes very important, the tools that support you to do this. So we're doing this, for example, with a few media owners in Europe already. We're really integrating different SSPs, DSPs. What you really need to find then is, okay, how do I prevent loss of opportunity? Because, if you book in specific slots or so for programmatic, but then you have direct deals coming in for a higher price or so, then you need to book on book. So it really comes down to, okay, can I add the intelligence onto my ad server to really mediate between them? Can I make these technical connections? Because although there's open RTB standard just out there, there's still all kinds of variations that you need to battle out with. And once you can do that, then you have the technical side there. But your ad server, of course, must have team, commercial aspects, strategies behind it. So,
a team of charting agents or digital charting strategists. Yeah.
Salespeople, as Michael correctly said. Or if you don't have salespeople, you may go the route that you have an intermediary SSP that brings the salespeople for you, or a mix both. It's possible.
Yeah, there's probably similar to the word programmatic, that's kind of an overloaded variable. I think the word ad server can mean a lot of things too. And I would say there's few components. There's this inventory piece. So can I book this or can I not, right? Is this available? Do I have space to sell? Do I have a seat on the flight kind of idea? There's this piece that then takes all those business rules and spits out some version of a schedule and then tries to insert programmatic or non-guaranteed transactions into said schedule. And then there's the thing that actually gets all of the digital assets to the device reliably, tracks them, does reporting, fires off pixels, all the fun stuff that we love to do in ad tech. So if someone built all of that in-house, it's a question of, do you have engineers on staff? Are you ready to code against integrations and APIs? Are you ready to do some work? I think we've seen, knock on wood, everything at this point. I think we've done over 110 integrations to date with custom systems across the landscape and globally. I've seen horrible things. I've seen great things. Probably more horrible than great, unfortunately. But one thing that is cool that came out of COVID, we've seen a lot of customers. We've got a big announcement coming out soon, but we've seen a lot of media owner customers deprecating their in-house solutions. It is very costly to run a software team, constantly evolve with the ad tech requirements, the agency requirements, as well as the requirements around solving problems around yield. And so we find that a lot of folks, especially during COVID, when it was kind of downtime, hey, let's clean up inside, let's do some soul searching of what we want to focus on. We were able to actually, the only part of our business during COVID to grow was actually our SaaS software business. So we actually worked with a lot of media owners to evolve some of their in-house tech. So it's been very exciting for us, actually. It's a pretty hot topic and continues to be as people try to get evolved on that side. But there's definitely still a lot of custom stuff out there.
So I have another, oh, sorry, Patty, go ahead. I see.
I was
We're
just
jumping
going
in.
to ask whether with the availability of data, is Programmatic going to help bring advertisers back to out of home as we come out of the pandemic? Because, people weren't moving around as much. Now they are. Is Programmatic a great way to bring the advertisers, to bring brands back into that space?
I think we've seen the answer to be yes. I mean, even from a metrics and currency perspective, I mean, demands on most of the measurement groups within the out-of-home community were forced to figure out how do we adjust our traffic numbers immediately to what's happening in the world right now. And that drastically changed out-of-home's positioning. I know that even during COVID, we would have a weekly update to a behavioral audience that we just called the COVID filter. And it was basically, we wouldn't serve ads to any screen that was, I think, less than like 40% of capacity from pre-COVID. So it gave a lot of our buyers confidence that's just like, I'm not going to buy anything that doesn't look somewhat normal. And that was just like the basics. And so without that, I mean, I think that was a huge selling proposition for us when we were going back into agencies late Q2, Q3, trying to say, oh, out of home's still cool. Don't worry. Middle of COVID, right? We're trying to do that game. And I think data was a massive value proposition for us, bringing that story back. And we just released a big research study with M4 about sentiment. I think the data around consumers around, hey, are you happier at home or outside of your home? It's kind of a no-brainer question at this point with what everyone's been through. And it's kind of an easy thing. If I'm a brand, I want to be around people when they're positive, when they're thinking well, when they've got their best mind on. I don't want to be in the slumps of their day. So I think the answer is absolutely, at least from my perspective.
Yeah,
Caroline, you looked like you wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kitty.
Just a short one to just echo from a media owner perspective in Europe, since 2017, we've been helping our media owner clients in Europe sell, for example, based on audiences. So what's audiences? It's the data that says how many people are there. So it's even the simplest form of data you can use for your planning. And that's what got most perturbed, of course, these past years. And this is what people are looking more to now to see how they plan and buy, based on audience. So, definitely there are more and more media owners who are helping integrate audience-based selling into their mix. And, it's growing actually. That's why also people are looking for programmatic, also to add some of this based on programmatic execution based on data, but also direct sales, no mistake. It's just the difference of what tools used to execute, but also direct sales more and more go to selling it and saying, okay, this is the audience you're going to reach with that, and including that in the mix.
Caroline, I'll give you the final stage here before we
I was just going to
open the floor.
agree with everything that's been said. I think, the data that came with digital out of home coming out of the pandemic was extremely useful to advertisers to look at travel patterns. And I think in Ontario and especially Toronto, where we've been in a lockdown for so long, I think everybody's still a little bit on edge with this fourth wave. So I think it'll continue feeding some of the decisions that we make moving into the fall and into early winter.
I love it. So I just want to say thank you for all of the amazing questions that have come in thus far. And we have about 7 minutes left. So I would like to open the floor. If anybody has additional questions, please post them in the Q&A box. There have been a couple of questions that came through. So one of which is how do we prepare for an AI-centric world as a business leader? So AI data, what are the expansion plans with the heavy focus on AI and machine learning?
Just maybe I take a short first step here. I've been hearing this question because ever since we started our company, that was 2013, it's been heavily focused on having AI as a core because we saw this as the wave that's coming. And that's what you're experiencing right now. AI to support all these programmatic or non-programmatic database decisions becomes more and more key factor. And I just take a very quick analogy. Look what happened in the stock market. First, they were trading manually, shouting across the room, sending bills, and this was then automated. And when you automate it, you need really powerful AI to work with the other AI in order to get the best. It's done in microseconds. So maybe we're not that close to that yet in programmatic out of home, but as a business leader, you should definitely take a look at AI, invest in it, take it seriously, have experts in AI. They don't need to know how AI works, but they need to be able to use it.
Michael, do you want to comment briefly on that before I ask one other question that came in from the audience?
Kind of like a naysayer, I think. I think for me, like, it's just a big buzzword. I don't know. I mean, I think we've got some fundamentals we got to figure out still. We got a lot of work to do in just catching up with other channels. I mean, is Facebook and Google, Amazon, are they successful because of AI or just because you can put $1 and you get $1.10 back as a brand? And if that's caused by AI, then yeah, I guess we all need AI as soon as possible. Like, get me more of it. But I don't have a clear delineation of what is the thing that AI is doing or opportunity for AI in our space in a very clear way. Sure,
I think it's pretty new still. We're still trying to digest the term between programmatic and automated. So I think getting into the AI space is a bit in the future. One question that came in relative to omni-channel approaches in terms of targeting the consumer's journey and predicting the consumer's journey with programmatic digital out of home. So is the technology ready and there to effectively do this with creative optimization? And how can we increase efficacy within the execution on this?
Is the technology there? I think so. We've been doing it. We've been working with measuring lift, incremental lift, A/B testing of creatives, lift by site location. Next, we're trying to figure out how we can layer in lift by frequency, and along with different data sets. Like, I think you need a bespoke DSP partner. That's what that sounds like.
I like it. Short and sweet. Okay, cognizant of time. We have 4 minutes left. There's one final question that came in that I will pose to the team. And then any questions we did not answer, we will send out in a follow-up post this event. So the last question that I want to ask the group is, you mentioned data. What are the data sources? For example, app SDK is very questionable / bloated currently. So what are we doing to ensure accuracy?
Yes, I think a lot of data in out of home gets tied back to the spatial component, like a lat long. And to the quick point of that question, there's some notes around it, around GPS data. Yeah, SDK based GPS data, like any data set's got some bad data in it. You've got to do cleansing on it. There's a lot of white paper around this, so I won't waste everyone's time going through all the different methodologies you use to clean up GPS data, but it's pretty well documented at this point. And so having the storage, processing power, and capabilities to do that, scale daily as you get all those dumps of data is important. I know we have to do that globally. Every partner we have that provides GPS, some of them are global, some of them are by country. And yeah, you've got to build a partnership. You've got to build a financial partnership as well that makes sense, because the data can get pretty expensive over time. But yeah, you've got to clean it in every country you're in. And then, make sure that you're doing that in a way that's still affordable at the end of the day. So it's one of our biggest costs on the server side probably over a third of our serving costs go to data processing.
Wow, that's very impressive. All right, everyone, we are 2 minutes to the end, so I just want to do some shout outs. First and foremost, thank you so much to everyone who joined. Thank you to the panelists for an amazing discussion and conversation. For those questions that did not get answered during the Q&A, we will follow up with responses to those. We also have some survey results that COMMB sent out a survey to some of our programmatic partners in the tech stack space, in the media owner space, as well as in the agency space, with some compelling results, tidbits of information coming from that. 45% of respondents found that programmatic digital out of home was a key driver in growth. We had 41% of respondents who indicated that they were very comfortable with programmatic digital out of home as a sales tool, which is really great to hear. We had 38% of respondents who use programmatic digital out of home very often, and 60% had indicated that there was still a bit of an internal divide with respect to programmatic digital out of home's buy-in. So indicating we need a bit more education in this space. One additional note that I'd like to call out is COMMB is involved in the AdTech Out of Home Toronto event. This is a global event that has come to Toronto. It was supposed to happen last year, but was postponed due to the pandemic. So this is our first in-person event on October 6th. I'll be doing a keynote there, so I hope that everybody can join in. And we've got many additional great speakers as well. So panelists, thank you so much. Attendees, thank you for your time. 4 o'clock right on the dot. Have an amazing afternoon, everyone.
Right.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thank you, guys.